Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Ilisapesi S. Weir. We're going to be discussing her book, Tales from the Kingdom of Tonga, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And Pesi was brought to People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business. UR Link Print and Media Publishing. If you have a book that you'd like moved, well, move it through UR Link. You can find them at urlinkpublishing.com. And guys, listen, it's absolutely a pleasure to have Pesi here on the line with us because the book we're going to be discussing, Tales from the Kingdom of Tonga, has such a great message behind it. Now listen, keep in mind, she's going to be discussing from her perspective the people of Tonga, right? And it's meant to bring an awareness to the Polynesian culture. But what I love and what is so beautiful and magnificent about this book is keep in mind the social unrest that we're all experiencing going on here in the States and really going on across the world. Guys, listen, the main message at the end of the day is once we understand other cultures, once we understand and we have an awareness of the differences amongst us, then and only then can we truly come together. Right? And what an amazing message that we love talking about here on People of Distinction, right? Bringing our human family together. Listen, guys, there's more that unite us than separate us. And Pesi is the expert on this. She's going to be able to explain all of this in much better detail. So without further ado, let's bring her here on the line with us. Pesi, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Benji. And thank you for having the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to talk to you about my book.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we thank you for being here with us. We're very excited to learn about this. I know I am. This is definitely going to be very educational for all of us, myself included. Now, Pesi, before we go into the book, let's hold off slightly, okay? Let's build that temptation just a little bit more. Tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself.
Right, yes. Benji, I was born in a small village in a very small volcanic island in the northern part of Tonga. Tonga comprises of 150 or more small islands, and the main island is right down south. And this is the most northern part, which is very near Hawaii, Samoa. So that's where I was born, in a little island called Niuatokapu, a sacred island. My parents, my father had just become a Methodist minister. Both my parents were secondary school teachers. And my father had just become a Methodist minister and was posted far away up north because the church felt when children are little they should travel around in the islands, and when it's about time for secondary school they go down to the main island. So that's how I started. After the Second World War, my father started becoming a Methodist minister. I was educated in Tonga, and then when I was 15, I was sent to Auckland in New Zealand to finish off my secondary, and went to university there before going back to Tonga. I went back for 3 years and taught in my old school before I immigrated to Melbourne, Australia. Mm-hmm. So that's where I've been. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, let's jump right in. Tales from the Kingdom of Tonga. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yes. In talking to my 6 to my actually 5 siblings. There were 6 of us in the family. I found that there were 2 others that had strong feelings about honouring our parents' lives and recording their story. And so that's how it started out. But in doing research for the background of Tonga and where they came from, their lineage, etc., I became aware of the bigger picture and was very interested to find out where the Polynesians came from, how come they spread right up to Hawaii and right down to Tonga, the most southern Polynesian island. So the stories about that, but Tonga is different from the other Polynesian places in that we have a kingdom. We have kings. We had kings from the 900s, which means that when they arrived in Tonga, they supposedly came from Samoa. When they branched off, they already had this a king and their royalty. We had royalty, and then we have the chiefs, and then the commoners. So Tonga is special in that has been the case right through up to now. And that's not found in any of the other Polynesian countries. The book is primarily about our parents in their times, from the beginning of 19th century to about 1970, but it tries to cover the history, the geography of the Kingdom of Tonga. So it's set against that, and of course, the Christianity being brought to Tonga. Mm-hmm. That is covered there too.
This is amazing. So it's such a rich history and a rich culture there. And already we're learning so much about it. Now, let's go into inspiration, Pesi. Now, of course, inspiration can take many forms. So we know briefly from, your description and talking about really you started this because you and your siblings wanted to write a book kind of, about your parents and their history, which then branched off into you wanting to learn more about the history of Tonga and led into this. So we know what inspired this particular narrative, but you're talking about your background and, your educational background. You actually spent some time, as you stated, in teaching, right? So you spent some time in education. What inspired you to switch and embark upon a creative journey of this magnitude and become a writer?
Yes, well, my experience is of the Tongan culture, and then in Australia and New Zealand. My brother actually ended up in New Zealand after his work. When he retired, he was working around the Pacific from New Zealand. So I went to school, I finished my schooling and went to university in New Zealand. So I knew bits about Maoris in New Zealand and the Pākehās, and then came to Australia. My life down in Melbourne mainly involves all the white Australians. But then I have come across the Aborigines here, and in New Zealand, of course, I mixed with Maoris. So I span a lot of the different cultures of Polynesia as well as Europeans. So as I delved in this, of course, you can't help but look at the differences in cultures. And so I was teaching. In Tonga, I was teaching the Tongan students. In here, I only came across 2 Aborigines in the school I was teaching. It was a huge school, but most of them, the rest were all European background. So I've always had to span the cultures. My husband started working with overseas aid because he and I, my Australian husband, he and I decided that we'd like to do that when we retire.
Mm-hmm.
But he retired first, so he started working overseas, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Jordan, Yemen, Kenya, Laos. So I was traveling to see him when I had holidays. So you see, when I'm trying to write about Tonga, I couldn't help but seeing the other points of view from the world. Yes, so that's how that's how my book. And so when I found out that the Polynesians, tracing back from Africa, going up to Iran, etc., and then coming east to the Pacific region, it was amazing. This world is small. Yeah, so that's how come I had fun connecting all that up with my little islands down here in the South Pacific.
Again, here on the line with Ilisapesi S. Weir, we're discussing her book, Tales from the Kingdom of Tonga, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Pesi, this has been fantastic so far. Thank you so much. Now, listen, next question. Why did you feel that this was a book that needed to be written? I mean, we know what started this journey. We know why you yourself wanted to learn more about your culture and more about the history of Tonga, but why didn't it stay there as just an idea in your mind or knowledge that you verbally passed around to those, around you? But you wanted to take it a step further, put the words on paper and put it out for the public as well. Why did you feel that was necessary?
Well, for many reasons, Benji. I've also got my grandchildren who grew up here, and the rest of my siblings ended up here in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Our cousins went to America, so they would never understand their background unless I did this, write about my parents' story and their grandpeople, their ancestors. And so my sister and brother and I also researched our beginnings. And so we have quite a few family trees researched from our relatives who were very happy to help. And the history of families are mainly by mouth. And so many of them were so happy to recite the generations back, the ancestors, and only a very few are written, are put down. And I already know a few who have got copies of the book are just so elated that they've got copies of their ancestors. They connect up with our ancestors. And so that's another reason for having things written down. Mm-hmm. And yes, just at the stage I started to look into this, there's hardly any books with history of the education in Tonga of the people who became educated. And so there's now the young ones who have grown up in New Zealand, especially, and here they have started writing. But I haven't come across one that has a lot of family trees in it. And so I have already got feedback from that, people connecting up their families to our trees.
You don't know where you're going until you find out where you've been, right? You don't know who you are until you find out what you are, things like that. And what an amazing journey that you're talking about and you're discussing, and what a beautiful gift to not only pass on to your family as you've already done, those that have moved to Australia and New Zealand and don't have that sense of culture that really all your ancestors possessed, because again, you're generations removed. What a fantastic gift to be able to give to them as well as everybody else out there. Listen, again, myself included, there's not much that I know about the Polynesian culture. And hearing you talk about this and hearing you give some of the stories this way, I mean, that's an incredible thing and such a fun educational ride for us all to really become aware of. Now, listen, one question that I would love to ask: what would you say, Pesi, was a highlight for you in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating prior to embarking upon this journey?
Well, Benji, actually, a whole lot. It's not just one highlight. It's covering where we came from. That was such a highlight. And finding that some of the Latin words are actually in our language. And that traveling as well, I found that people in Asia, in Bali, some of the names and some of the faces look like my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
My one daughter looks exactly the same as one girl who was at the hotel. And some of the names are similar. But then going to India, for example, there are so many of their sacred names, etc. My own father's title is Muni, which means strong. And I was Googling, looking for some Tongan reference about it, and it was all about India. It is their special term as well, and it has something to do with their deity. And so, then I go to Japan, and they also found that Japan's royal family has the same sort of connection. They think that their king descended from, they've got a deity as their origin. Well, in Tonga, our king, our very first dynasty, was sent from the heaven. And so the similarities in the cultures around the world is just amazing. So that part of it, it just made the world smaller for me. So connecting my travels with this, I thought, oh, what a small world. So that's one part of it. But then, of course, tracing where our parents, our ancestry, came up with that, the royal family is not far away from us, about probably 6 generations back. The one of our great-great-great-grandfather gave rise to part of the royal family now. So that's another amazing thing. So there are many connecting parts that I discovered in this journey.
Well, listen, as I started off this interview by saying, guys, listen, if we look hard enough, there's more that connects us than separates us. Okay. And just because, someone is living on the opposite side of the world doesn't mean that there's no connection that can be found, right? In our human family, we are all connected, and all you have to do is search for it. And once you find it, you'll realize how connected we all are. And that is such a beautiful message, Pesi. Listen, as we close out this fantastic interview, last question, and I know we've already started to go into it, but let's just make it as clear and concise. Let's really let our listening audience know. if there is one central message or one central theme that you really want to make sure that our listening audience here at People of Distinction knows about your book, what would that message be?
I think foremost is understanding and being tolerant about other people. We are all humans. There are more similarities than there are differences.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of my story, that is a major thing that has come to, and especially we see social unrest that has surfaced recently. I just think if we took a bit more time to learn about the others, cultures, etc., we'll find that after all, we are just humans on this beautiful planet Earth. And yes, we should be grateful and feel blessed that we all share this earth.
There you have it.
Okay.
Listen, Pesi, that is more than okay. Okay, that is such a beautiful message to end off this interview with. I mean, guys, listen. You know what you have to do, okay? Let's not waste any more time. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Pick up your copy of Tales from the Kingdom of Tonga by Ilisapesi Sisifa Weir. What a fantastic narrative. Pesi, this has been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Benji. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.